Welcome, everyone. I'm Michael Cohen. I'm the director of the Observatory on Latin America here at the New School. I'm delighted you could all come to this event on this rainy day, which has slowed us down a little bit, and we're thank you for your patience in the time and the delay. The Observatory on Latin America was established in 2006 following the creation of the Argentina Observatory in September 2003 on the occasion of the visit of then President Kirchner to the New School with the First Lady, Senator Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. At that time, Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz also participated in a first meeting with President Kirchner here at the New School. We were pleased that at that time also the First Lady agreed to serve as the chair of the advisory board of the Argentine Observatory. In September 2006, together with the First Lady, and in recognition of the growing political changes in the region, particularly with the growing number of progressive governments in Latin America, we decided to expand the Argentine Observatory into the Observatory on Latin America. The New School's Board of Trustees approved this proposal in 2007, and we've been very active since then with two major programs. The first program is Latin America on the Move, which brings Latin American leaders to the New School to allow their voices to be heard without the mediation by the US press and directly to people in New York. In spring 2009, the OLA held a conference of Latin American politicians and leaders to evaluate the proposals prepared for the Obama administration concerning U.S. relationships with Latin America. The New School is interested in bringing current Latin American thinking to New York. Today's lecture by Dr. Nestor Kirchner fits within this program. Our second program, directed by Professor Margarita Gutmann, is the Building Latin American Bicentennials program, which began in 2005 in anticipation of the commemoration of bicentennials, which are taking place 2008, 2009, 2010. In 2008, the OLA, together with the School of Architecture in the University of Buenos Aires and the University Central de Chile, held a call for papers and audiovisual materials. We were very surprised. We received 175,000 hits on the website of the OLA during that time. And this led to awards for winning papers and a conference held at the New School on the bicentennials in February 2009. A second call for papers is now underway with 7 academic institutions in 5 Latin American countries, including Argentina, Chile, Ecuador, Mexico, and Uruguay. Dr. Kirchner, we too are broadening our focus to the regional level. This has become the largest academic partnership of our university. Over the next 2 months, we will have 3 major events. On October 6th, Ambassador Jorge Arguello, permanent representative of Argentina to the United Nations, will give a lecture entitled, "It Takes Two to Tango, Solving the Malvinas Islands Dispute." From November 1 to November 4, we will be holding a conference here at the university on the lessons of recent economic management in Latin America and their application to the problems in the United States and in Europe. Alicia Bárcena, the executive director of the Economic Commission for Latin America, Mercedes Marco del Pont, the governor of the Central Bank of Argentina, and various other development leaders will be coming to the New School for that meeting. I would like to recognize here the presence of 2 of our deans of the New School, David Scobie, the Executive Dean of the New School for General Studies, and Neil Grabois, Dean of the GPIA Milano School of Management and Urban Policy. This afternoon's program will include an introduction by Tim Marshall, a lecture by Nestor Kirchner, and then questions and answers moderated by Margarita Gutmann, followed by a reception with Argentine wine downstairs in the Lang Cafe on the first floor. Let me now introduce Tim Marshall, the provost of the New School, who will introduce Dr. Kirchner. For our Latin American friends, the provost is the senior academic officer in a university in the United States. Tim was the former dean of Parsons, the New School for Design, and visited Buenos Aires in March of this year. Tim.
Thank you, Mike. And there are many people in this country that don't know what a provost does either, so that was probably helpful. It is my great pleasure to be here and to introduce this Observatory on Latin American program. I'm especially pleased to welcome Dr. Nestor Kirchner, former President of Argentina and now Executive Secretary of UNASUR, a regional organization for cooperation and development among South American nations. So welcome. Dr. Kirchner was elected President of Argentina in 2003 and led the very strong economic recovery of the country from the crisis of 2001-2002. His presidency was characterized by his outstanding economic management, outspoken support for human rights, and active outreach to other countries of the Latin American region. When he left office in 2007, he had a 70% approval rating, one of the highest levels of any president from any democratic country, which when I visited there and discovered what an extraordinarily vivid and passionate political discourse is going on in Argentina, it's all the more remarkable. Earlier this year, Dr. Kirchner was elected by the governments of South America to serve as the Executive Secretary of UNASUR, and he will talk today about his hopes for the UNASUR's work. Since taking office, he's already successfully mediated a conflict between Colombia and Venezuela and spoken out against the Arizona laws profiling people with so-called Latin American appearances. Dr. Kirchner, it is an honor for the New School to welcome you back to our campus. The university has learned a lot from your country in the past 10 years, sending students on field programs, working with local institutions such as the School of Architecture, Design and Urban Planning at the University of Buenos Aires, and the Foundation for Sustainability, Education and Solidarity, and holding conferences on issues such as Latin American bicentennials, in which your countrymen have participated. We have also been honored by the multiple visits your wife, President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, has made to the New School, and for her chapter in the New School book, Construir Bicentenarios of Argentina. I would like to acknowledge also the presence here today of Ambassador Jorge Arguello, Argentina's permanent representative to the United Nations, and Juan Manuel Abal Medina, Deputy Chief of Cabinet, whom I also met when I was in Buenos Aires in March, and Consul General Ricardo Lirea, and Deputy Council Minister Adriana Trotta. Finally, I want to convey our gratitude to the funders who have made today's program possible through their support of the Observatory on Latin America, Julian Studley and the Alexander Family Foundation. So please now join me in welcoming Dr. Kirchner to the podium to give today's address. Dr. Kirchner.
Okay. First of all, and I'm very, very happy to be here again. I'd also like to say that here with us we have Ambassador Arguello and the Adjunct Chief of Cabinet, Juan Manuel Abal Medina. We have the Governor of Entre Rios, Sergio Uribarri, and the Governor of Santiago del Estero, Gerardo Zamora, today. I believe in order to understand the Latin American process, it is essential to speak, first of all, of Argentina. I will try to explain and summarize what UNASUR tries to do, and also, of course, we will analyze and discuss a little bit, even though it may be very controversial, the vision that we have on elections in Venezuela, because what's important is to mention all these subjects, to talk in plurality, to issue opinions, that's essential too, I think free men and women are used to giving their opinion without concern for the for our differences in opinion, because I believe it's important to have this relative truth to construct the full truth. A few days ago, I was talking to President Clinton, well, a few years ago. I was saying that when we had the crisis in Latin America in 2001, had the United States behaved the way it behaved with Mexico when we had the tequila effect, when they had $50 billion as it did at the time, most likely the Argentine crisis then would have ended up different. Maybe it wouldn't have been the best for Argentina, but the crisis wouldn't have been as deep as it was, because obviously 2001 Argentina was alone. I don't mean to justify the default, I don't mean to justify bad government, I don't want to justify economic programs that I do not share, I don't want to justify policies I don't share. However, when creditors, after the successful economic plan that Argentina carried forward, complain today, they should complain to the country that had a different policy towards Mexico at some point for treating the situation differently. However, in 8 years, Argentina was able to decrease the debt. When I took power, Argentina had a debt of over 360 to 180 of their GDP after experiencing the most important growth, except for the years of crisis, which was last year. We've grown an average of 8 or 9% or more. Argentina today has 42% of the GDP, and 21% is domestic debt. Only 21% is within international debt. If with the exchange, 93% of the defaulted debt is active, and Argentina is complying and servicing the debt. Our president has decided to increase this by paying foreign debt with our reserves. This generated a lot of controversy. Why would it be paid with our reserves? Last year, particularly, our foreign debt cost about 15% in international markets. In Latin America and specifically in Argentina, we're paid 0.5% for our reserves. So obviously, having reserves accumulated on our rate, when you go out and look for 15% capital, it would have been wrong economically. Obviously, it was the right thing to do. Argentina had $43 billion in reserve when the president last year decided to use them to pay its foreign debt. But today it has $51.8 billion in reserve. The reserves increased, the debt was paid with decreased financial cost, and got out of debt faster. In multilateral as well as private creditors were paid. So, these are sovereign political decisions that can be taken, and we can take this because of the exchange and renegotiation of our international debt, and because we pay the international monetary funds so that it wouldn't have this attitude towards Argentina, which forced us to decide things on the wrong policies. Many countries in the world are paying for this, for example, Greece, or other countries that followed the rules of the International Monetary Fund. No one has criticized it enough already, but they've now more indebted, they've ended social mobility policies, they've caused bankruptcy in some industries. Why? Because of the thinking that the state as a promoter is the wrong role to play if you look at it from the Washington Consensus in the 90s, Argentina could, as other countries in Latin America show, that because of the state, because of the policies that we took, because of the stimulus policies, because of investment policies in industry development, growth, the profit of the productive growth that Argentina has made, it generated policies of inclusion, social mobility, and policies that allowed us to decide for ourselves. So, during our bicentennial, we celebrated it happily because after many, many years in Argentine history, finally we could have a clear policy of inclusion, growth, and for instance, today Argentina is growing at an average close to 9% per year, and it will continue to grow between 8 and 9% this year. The rate of unemployment is now close to 7.6%, and we hope to decrease this some more. The industry has grown by around 10%. So we do deeply believe in our neo-Keynesian policies that we've implemented. The region has experienced serious problems, in some cases similar to Argentina, but each region has their own particular political process. Bolivia is experiencing a very, very interesting process. It's interesting to follow it closely. I believe it's revalued the role of the Bolivian people and the concept of cultural and philosophy and development. It's Uruguay, Brazil are also experiencing an interesting change. They're growing, and we are able to live with each other in the same framework, building a policy for the region that unites us all. Some think it's impossible, some think it's absolutely impossible and difficult, because many times they think they will build a political party that should be international in a region where diversity is integrated. We do need to integrate our region so we can talk to other regions, emerging regions, and other blocs like the European Union and others, the Arab countries. So we need to, or the Middle East, to be able to have a dialogue with the whole world from a common position in South America. Mercosur is not solving this problem because it is basically, even though it is trying to move forward politically, it's really more of an economic agreement. We try to have a common economic policy, but it's very difficult. We have a country that is growing very fast, and it's a very big country, Brazil. We have Argentina, which is growing, but we're smaller than Brazil, and there are other countries which are very different, very much smaller, Uruguay and Paraguay. Today, with economic progress of Argentina and the region, we begin to think how we're going to attack these differences. In 2003, Brazil had a lot of problems. Argentina was in the fault, and it was broke. It was almost discouraged. And compared to Uruguay and Paraguay, we couldn't really solve the asymmetry, because how do you do this? You have to have active policies from the stronger countries to be able to help and invest in the countries that are suffering because of this. We have the same thing with the Andean agreement. In 2006, when I was still president, we started to discuss how we could find some common framework for political integration. How could we coordinate state policies that could unite us? in the region. Basically, the policies had to have economic development that were just and inclusive, respecting the freedom of expression and different opinions, but policies that respected human rights and democratic policies. You know that freedom of expression, human rights, and respect to democratic systems in our region is essential and basic to be able to leave behind the painful past that we experienced. After a lot of effort, particularly in my country, we have we're going through a process of trials and for the genocidal dictatorship of the from 76 till 83. We are doing this today, but we're still behind. Historically, however, we've made some progress.
Also, with regard to freedom of speech, Argentina can be proud today, thanks to the present-day government, of having a policy, a law that tends definitely to put an end to media concentration and financial concentration. Media concentration, which there's nothing worse to put an end to the quality of institutions or to determine the political decisions that a people can have. It is very difficult for people to vote and for corporations and monopolies to continue deciding. It is important to face decisively a society where everyone can speak with all the possibilities, with all equality. This law, this government is having the support of the UN, the officers, and the majority of the officials in the region, and it is also allowing definitely for us to have the possibility of having equality of possibility, equality of expression, that every sector can express itself, and pressure groups will have a very different role and not a conditioning role as they have had up to now. We in the region, at first, when we began constructing, when we began to advance later on the governments that are now in our region, we began to try to make compatible situations that were different. It wasn't easy, but our first success under the presidency of UNASUR, President Bachelet, when the solution on Bolivia came about a year and a half or 2 years ago, when UNASUR was able to carry out its role, UNASUR that still needs to have one more vote in order to have the institutional recognition. We are in a pre-foundational stage. We have the parliament from Chile. We are waiting for the parliament from Paraguay, and there's another country that we need to have the 8 votes so that we can function institutionally. But there, the role in the institutional crisis in Bolivia, UNASUR's role was fundamental and central. UNASUR that has been able to make compatible, without giving up any objective, political and institutional situations of different ideologies, of different philosophies. In other words, the vocation and the deepening of the project did not change, and with what happened in Chile with the presidency of Sebastián Piñera, and in Colombia, more or less the same political and ideological vision was maintained. More or less, I say, because I think I see differences. I think Santos has more to do with traditional power than Uribe did, and I think there are some changes that in fact could favor integration at this stage that we are now living. And well, the living together, we have the living together that we are in has allowed us to have a situation where there was always the situation of Honduras that we can also touch upon and we can discuss. And the truth is that making compatible philosophical and economic systems, the exchange, the work of different teams, the decision to dare to think differently, the decision to talk about different groups. Our discussion with the European Union was great. We were able to look at two different points of view. The whole world has a hard time understanding the appearance, the presence of Latin American thought, but evidently these were very useful and positive discussions, as were the discussions that we're having with the U.S., right? Where the vision that they have on the region, and there have been points where we have agreed and points where we disagreed, but there is always a very strong dialogue. The main philosophy of UNASUR is the total respect for democracy, the sovereignty of the peoples, the freedom of speech, and the support and solidarity and for social inclusion and permanent solidarity between peoples and the integration with the world. This is a central task that UNASUR has to carry out, and we are totally committed to do. Ever since I became to be part of big and small programs, so an example was the beginning of the agreement that we got between Colombia and Venezuela, sister republics that were facing each other for different circumstances, when I should recognize that both Chavez and Santos, in an act of total and absolute maturity, worked together in order to be able to harmonize. And everybody knows Colombia, Venezuela, it reminds me the border that we have with our sister republic of Chile. Now we have a 10/10 relationship, but because of dictatorships and other things, we had problems. And in such long borders, it is hard to solve these problems. Imagine, between Colombia and Venezuela, we encountered situations where, because of climate situations, the course of the rivers changes and the border changes, and because of the long border that they have. Just think, aside from the different institutions, I have a very rich experience. I went to be part of the commission that would mediate for the liberation of Clara Rojas and Ingrid Betancourt there in 2006 and 2007 when I was leaving my presidency, and the comment was always that I never came across such a particular situation as the one I lived there, because we would go to the jungle to converse with members of the FARC or other groups, and we didn't know who was who because everybody was wearing green, and the paramilitaries, and everybody was commander. And so you can imagine that the situation that we were in, when you slept, there was a helicopter overflying, and it was a very particular, very difficult situation for me, totally new to. It was really a tremendous experience, but that was the reality, at least at that time. I spoke with President Santos and President Chavez, and we were able to advance and understand that there is a need to live together in the region and between them. Imagine the exchange between them is $8 million. It had gone down to 1,600 million, and the people were really poor and broke, and these are two peoples that are complementary, and their human resources and economies are really together, and they were facing each other. And so I came across President Santos, who surprised me positively. I should recognize it, because by living through a situation or the prejudices or ideological reservations, and really the meetings that I had with the president, I found somebody who totally represented the interest of Colombia. I met President Chavez, who was totally willing, and we were able to take the first step to renew relationships, begin to solve the differences between them, and now after elections we are going to continue working to consolidate between Venezuela and Colombia a definite friendship in diversity, two peoples that can have different ideologies, but that their synthesis, the alternation in democratic plurality is something that will not alter the process of integration of the peoples, integration that governments that have nothing to do with the realities of the people complicate the situation. But when we say and we believe that both countries are willing to work towards their commercial integration for the respect for human rights and total commitment to democracy, taking every single step to do this, we feel that is totally important to go down that road because that is the road of peace, of growth, and a totally different Latin America. We are very careful in defending the democratic interests in the region because we have gone through very difficult situations, and this is why UNASUR took the posture that it took regarding Honduras, the one that must be taken on any situation, situations that in some countries are still confounding their institutions, and I give you the specific case of Paraguay, where we are all working so that President Lugo can consolidate and advance in decision making in Paraguay. The experience of UNASUR is an initial experience that does not want to block any kind of development or agreement that can take place. Peoples or agencies such as the Andean Pact or Mercosur we will try to have one single parliament. We don't want to have a Mercosur parliament, a Andean Pact parliament. We want to have a great parliament for Latin America, and also we want to study closely, and this is a very personal opinion, but I think that we have to also bring Mexico into the region because this would be very important to consolidate a very framework of stability, and these are steps that should be taken in the future that we will have to discuss in the future. UNASUR that is getting close to the change in the presidency, and right now is on the hands of President Correa of Ecuador, and on November 26th, President of Guyana will take over, and we will continue, of course, working in the General Secretariat, working for integration, internal integration, and try to find and generate and help to consolidate institutionally and politically and economically the whole region in a process of growth, which is very important. Imagine, we are very optimistic with what is happening in the region. I think that there will be important levels of growth, and when I analyze the situation in Argentina, you have to understand where we come from, but we have had the greatest growth in the last 8 years. We have a process of reduction of the debt that is the most important one. We have developed our own capital markets, and we have taken measures that I think that have to be admired and seen by the world, and this is for all the children of the workers that are unemployed, that will get the same allowance as the workers who are active. In other words, we've been able to reduce poverty to 3.5%, and we have lowered poverty from 64% to 13.5%. And so with this permanent integration policies, and thank God, the functioning of Argentinian economy and the policies promoting a state that is active, very often in contradiction to truths that appear to be indisputable in the world. Argentina, very often in the face of incomprehension, but in the face of the crisis in 2008 and 2009, the understanding that it's production that generates money, that booms and financial schemes that supposedly are for growth, and later on they have nothing to do with reality. The greater presence of money and the presence of a productive structure has come about what we were saying before, and we heard, I think, in Ohio, President Obama, when we talked about industrial stimulus, will create. This is fundamental for Argentina. Our president, facing the crisis of 2008 and 2009, prevented unemployment from growing and allowed the economy to take advantage of growth, and this is very important. We believe that policies such as the health reform are very important to have a good health system, policies that accompany equality, but the thing is that it's very difficult in a short time to generate changes, strategic changes, when sometimes one has to resolve policies of long-standing that shown truths that were thought to be indisputable, and everything now is up for grabs. When we were talking about reserves in Argentina, our government was closed on both sides. We had reserves of 43 billion, and we have with $18 billion. I think differently here. I don't think that the reserves have to go with the monetary issuance that there is. I think issue of money has to go along with the GDP. But these are philosophical discussions that have to be done, but they do make the future and future discussions that we must have, and not be afraid of analyzing, to have progressive policies, to be able to do self-criticism, to know when you are right and when you're wrong, and know how to make corrections. In the Venezuelan process, there were some journalists who asked me, what did I think about the Venezuelan process, about what happened yesterday?
It's too soon to give my opinion, but I was in Venezuela. We have deep respect for the Venezuelan people and President Chavez, who helped Argentina in difficult times when no one else was helping us, buying our bonds and all that. But besides that, and honestly, I believe Chavez's election was very, very important, because Venezuela had no electricity, had no water. The country shrunk by 6 or 7%. Its inflation is quite high, and even though he got 95 or 96 congressmen, representatives, I think he got a couple of points over, I think, that the Latin American Parliament. So it was interesting, but also he has taken a decision, and like many decisions, it will have him think about what he needs to do, what he needs to improve, how will he solve all the pending things he needs to be solved. But while I was there, I was surprised by the elections, because had we not had gas, electricity in Argentina, if elevators don't work, and we'll get 4% votes and we'll have to run away on the street. So honestly, you always look at it from the view in where you are. These elections were, in my opinion, very interesting. I also believe that he has the will to improve, to fix his mistakes. I think that when the president asked him to meet with the Jewish community to put an end to this confrontation, he really came with a good attitude. So we hope Venezuela will be okay. And also what people were discussing on the street will be now discussed in Parliament. But the reason they were discussing this on the street is because opposition in 2005, the opposition didn't join the elections. Now that it did present themselves, they'll both be represented. So the institution will be working on different views. And I don't mean to get involved in Venezuela's internal affairs, but in Parliament we'll be able to discuss projects and Venezuela's future path. So yesterday's elections, give or take, some are happier, some are not as happy. I think politically speaking is an important step forward to continue strengthening the institutional system in the region. I don't know if anybody wants to ask me any questions, anybody, about anything. I'm happy to answer as honestly as I can. Thank you very much, Dr. Kirchner, for your presentation. We'll have the floor now if they want to ask any questions and to Dr. Kirchner, and perhaps somebody wants to make a comment. Let's first invite people who want to ask questions to please come up to the microphone, which is to your right, so you can ask the questions. So those who want to ask questions, please use the microphone. Stand up and go to the mic. I think we'll take three questions from different people so that Dr. Kirchner can answer afterwards. And we will ask you to please give your name and country of origin or institution. And as far as possible, please be brief and clear when you ask your questions so that we have an active and rich exchange here with Dr. Kirchner. Hi, how are you? I'm Agustino from Argentina, from Columbia University. I first of all would like to thank you for being here to talk to us, and I wanted to ask you about institutionality and democracy. One of Latin America's historical problem was leaders that stay in power, perpetuate themselves in power. UNASUR talks about democratic institutionalization, but your political space is seeking a third mandate, trying to avoid a constitutional impediment. You and your wife alternate powers. So how can you reconcile these two positions? Well, first of all, do you think perhaps we can listen to three questions and then you can answer? No, I'd rather answer question by question, if I may. Okay. First of all, Argentina's constitution provides for, well, first of all, let me tell you that there's still no candidates that have been named by my party for 2011. Because the biggest problem we have today is to govern Argentina. We want to help the president so she could do the best government that we'll have, and then next year we'll decide about who will be the next candidate. But to answer your question, to be precise, the two of us are two completely different people. Other than loving each other and sharing a whole life together, constitutionally, we are not the same. I already had my presidency from 2003 until 2007, and I had 70% approval rate. I could have been re-elected. The president has started her mandate 2007 till 2011. She started with 60% approval rate. Now it's 30%, and today she has the greatest political consensus, 58%. Both of us constitutionally can be elected in 2011. That does not mean that either of us will be a candidate, but constitutionally speaking, we can, because both have had only one presidency. We never seek re-election, not yet anyway, and constitutionally it is permitted. Second of all, if the Argentine people, thirdly actually, if the Argentine people decide to support the political project of 2011 to 2015, we'll be terribly happy, because we believe that then they will acknowledge this great process of transformation that Argentina has experienced. It doesn't mean we don't respect other people's vision. We respect you and your vision, but it's good to have the Constitution read, and you will understand it. It's very clear, and I think I've answered your question. Thank you, Doctor. Good afternoon, Dr. Néstor. I am one of your admirers. I study at the Jorge Ace University. I was born in Ecuador, but I live in the United States. My question is about UNASUR. specifically coming back to what brings us here. In order to have economic integration, you need to have a currency, a common currency. Are you considering having a common currency or creating a common currency? And when we will see the results? We're all interested in that. Oh my God, what a question. It's difficult. Let's see about currency. Do I have a couple of minutes? I'll take my time. Let's see the crisis in the European economic community, the single currency. It seems, well, I think it's really difficult to handle an international crisis or a crisis in the European community having a single currency if countries don't have the same systems and the same structures. I talked to Chancellor Merkel, and I was supporting the single currency. Okay, we always thought it was quite important for the region. And Chancellor Merkel said to me, "Hey, listen, son, this is the way they talk." She was having an elections in Bavaria, and she lost them. She said, "I must answer to the German people. And let me tell you something," he said. In Germany, people retire when they're 66 or 68 years old, approximately. I can't remember the exact. And we're assigning 19 billion euros. In Greece, they retire at when they're 53. What shall I tell the German people? So her answer, I think it's difficult. If we don't have the same functioning, the structure, the policies, health, minimum wage, if we don't have the common integration policy, how do you handle? How do you have one central bank? I lived through the crisis in Argentina. The difference between Greece and Argentina to our favor is that we could handle our own currency, our economic policy, but if the central bank doesn't have the tools to handle their own crisis, such as this Greece, because they have a European central bank, then it's difficult. So a single currency is something we could debate for a long time. It's very hard. It's very hard to apply, but if you wanted to apply it, you should have the same standards, the same institutions, the same costs for healthcare, education, investment, technological investment, energy, and see how you can solve the global managing of the policies and the monetary and economic instruments. Otherwise, it'd be too hard. And Greece is proof of that. This is why we're still discussing this, and we're still talking about it passionately in UNASUR, Mercosur, and in fact the Andean community. We're discussing how we could actually have a single currency, which is not easy at all because willpower doesn't cut it. And after the European community crisis, we have to listen to that. They've done good integration, but there's some difficulties now. We need to really analyze this so that we do not repeat their mistakes. And thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Alejandro Banabos. I live in the United States, but I'm Argentine. I'd like to know your opinion as the Secretary of UNASUR and as a senator from Argentina. What do you think about the law of the glaciers? To me, it's a matter that matters. The water and pollution, it's the right to life. It is the future. So I'm very, very committed to this, and I'd like to know your personal opinion. Okay, well, I was born in Santa Cruz, and I live in Calafate, and that's where my residency is. So you can imagine that we have the biggest glaciers in Argentina. In this case, my opinion then is the same as the president. And the president at some point vetoed a law about the glaciers, and a different law is being discussed. So the president was clear defending the glaciers, and I don't know if you remember, but the president really fought while she was a senator. Well, I can't say it was a fight, but she did have a big debate about continental ice caps with our sister Republic of Chile, the limit, the borders, the water reserves, and all that. So I think the Argentine government has a very clear position about that. I am Dominican. My name is Carlos. I study social sciences. I'm doing my doctorate. 3 days ago, my country celebrated the anniversary of 47 years after a coup d'etat to Professor Borch. The United States, the Catholic Church was responsible for that. The same thing happened in 2002 in Venezuela and recently in Honduras. What kind of mechanisms to prevent or react would UNASUR have so that this won't happen in the future? Honestly, as usual, honestly, I think that we need to continue with democracy. Under no circumstances do we support this kind of process. An important official of the United States told me that, well, this is what's happening with Honduras, but after what happened in Honduras and after the killing of 10 people from the press and seeing what happened, obviously it's been horrible. The region reacted quite well. There were some differences. Some have recognized the government, but most did not. So we hope that Honduras, in its sovereignty, can solve this democratically, giving everybody equal rights so that they could have a democracy and so everybody can participate, those who think alike and those who do not. And we need to deepen our culture of democracy. Democracy is not negotiable. Those who change governments are the people, but you consolidate democracy by having institutional systems that work this way, because the quality of a democracy is not just to be able to vote democratically, but you need to be able to govern democratically. It cannot be managed by monopolies or others, as it happens in most of the regions. Look at the elections in Brazil. Look at the debate that Lula has with the media. It's incredible. It's democratic. And this is because there are things that need to change in the region. Companies and financial monopolies are something really bad. Media monopolies, whether state or private, let me be clear. I'd rather have 1,000 voices, even if 950 are against me. But I want them all to be able to speak. We cannot accept state monopolies nor private monopolies. This is the only way to consolidate democracy so that what you said will not happen again. Good afternoon. My name is Paula Liquez. I teach Latin American integration in La Plata University. I want to ask you, why do you think so many people have so many preconceptions about progressive governments in Latin America when it comes to re-elections? Like most people, or a lot of European constitutions do provide for indefinite re-election, say in Berlusconi. So why do they use the term populism in Latin America but not in Europe? Well, first of all, it's moving to hear somebody from La Plata University, where Cristina and I actively militated during the decade of the 70s. But what a question. Let me see. I think it's a cultural problem. Somehow they've put it in our heads that if we are re-elected, and I don't think it's in bad faith even from those who think this way. It's a cultural problem. They've put it in our head that if people choose a government more than once, then they avoid the natural exchange of governments or the alternate governments, as such some would say. But I think that this is my vision. In terms of the presidency, I think it's a good idea to have re-elections. And after a mandate, one could have the possibility to go forward, not as close as the US, but in all over the world, in most countries, governors are elected indefinitely, and so are mayors. You have to believe in the people. And in Latin America, we need to really become mature. People have the maturity and the responsibility to change, improve, or alternate government. Let's believe in society. Let's have a little bit more respect for ourselves. We know how to choose. We know, yes, things have happened. We voted in good faith for some things that never happened, but it was because the leaders were not courageous enough. It's what happened in the past. I like to talk about what I feel. But what happened in 1999 when people voted for change in 99? People, when it voted, the alliance in Argentina voted for change. However, those who took power were afraid to change. They were afraid to change the convertibility law. You remember you needed to get out of that. They were afraid to take the smallest step. They finally ended up with the same economic policy, so much so that in the end they brought back the same minister of economy that sometimes then it's much more dangerous. It's good for people to choose, but the most serious problem in the region has been that we've had discourse to get there and a different discourse many times to govern. You try to be more politically correct and to do the things that need to be done. And if you say what you think that you need to do in your own country, then what you say you need to do. That's why people voted you. And you have to put an end to the fear of being politically incorrect. I can assure you that in your generation, those who will be the heads of Argentina, I hope you're profoundly politically incorrect, because these are the people that build the better times for our people.
Hi, Dr. Kirchner. My name is Ramon. I'm from Colombia, from the National University, studying political science, and I'm here at the university. And my question, I was waiting for the conference when I read on my phone that the prosecutor's office in Colombia had removed Senator Cordova, whom you know very well because she cooperated with the FARC. Obviously, what I wanted to ask you is, with concern that I see Colombia as the only country that is further from democracy and democratic institutionality, and I wanted to see what your viewpoint is with regard to the situation in Colombia nowadays, the situation between the FARC and the government, and above all, I worry also the position of the U.S. government certifying Colombia in human rights when we see that Colombia right now is great for this. And I wanted to ask you for your opinion. Your question is real easy. Well, first of all, my deep respect for Senator Piedad Cordova, with whom we have shared important and difficult moments. No one can relate Piedad to the FARC. She has a democratic attitude, and to try to have those who are suffering the terrible pain of kidnap, because I have to talk clearly. The FARC is the big discussion that we're having now. I think that they are hindering. They're even further back than the Cold War, because they could help a lot for the consolidation of democracy in Colombia. And what they generate is the justification of many anti-democratic attitudes in some sectors that do not want democracy in Colombia. They generate the opposite. And so, really, with regard to their behavior, I have deep differences with that, and because this is not the way to consolidate democracy at all. The work that Piedad Cordova has done is excellent, and how to help Colombia to be closer to the region, it is by through dialogue. And this is the question that President Santos had. I thought it was impossible for us to converse. People who have different viewpoints, but we were able to do it, and I think that we try to carry on a dialogue and say what we think. Conversations that I'm not going to make public that I have had with President Santos have been frank. They have not been sharing of praise one to the other, but rather in a constructive way. We have to work hard. I explained this and I synthesized what I lived through Colombia when the liberation of Clara Rojas and Ingrid Betancourt, they were liberated later on, but I did contribute. I think that we need to contribute to the consolidation of democracy in Colombia, human rights in Colombia. We have to put an end, and we hope that we can put an end to this internal confrontation that there is so that the people can express itself with more freedom and more completely. I believe that the attitude, and I say this frankly, the attitude that the FARC have does not contribute to the democratization of Colombia because it radicalizes and it closes the way for progressive forces in Colombia that can be building with much more power with an electoral growth that is much greater, but the contradiction generated by the FARC reduces space and the capacity for development, very often generating fears that should not be there. It's a complicated topic. We need to help Colombia. We are going to be working very hard to consolidate and contribute everything we can to Colombia, but we should say that when we were in Colombia, we spoke with President Santos and with Piedad Córdoba, and with all those people who came to talk to us, we did it in Colombia itself. In other words, we were ready to do it. What has to be done is generate conditions and everything else by helping factors, exogenous factors to democracy so that they lose the functionality in order to create an ample democracy in Colombia. It is very easy sometimes to exaggerate things on the one side, but we have to have a global vision. I was in Colombia, I was in Bogota, and I was in Villavicencio. It was a place of confrontation. I was in the Colombian jungle right there. I was there. And I was told not to go there because they said that I could be carried away. And former President Uribe said, don't go, because I went with Marco Aurelio, who is the main advisor of Lula. This is just an anecdote, but I was told, don't go in there because sometimes they will hold you for 10 years too. So Marco Aurelio will say to me, man, I'm too old to do this. What's going to happen to me? But really, that is the situation, that we should contribute to plurality and diversity, and let's hope that just as the right is organized in Colombia, that the center right can be organized, progressive forces can be organized that will generate alternancy. All right. Is there any other question? Yes. Good afternoon. Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Anapura, and I am from a journalist from P Agency. And this week during the General Assembly, or last week, several presidents from Latin America expressed their worry about drug trafficking in the region. And specifically, Bolivian president said that he was afraid of drug trafficking and Bolivia could not be left alone. You, as the Secretary of UNASUR, what do you think UNASUR can do regarding drug trafficking? Well, a lot. We are beginning. Drug trafficking is a task that is complicated, very difficult, with very strong financing, with spaces sometimes close to institutions that are worrisome, and I think that the region has a fundamental role, and I think that this is why we need to cooperate and have clear policies regarding drug trafficking. Policies that also have to be intelligent, so that in solidarity we can generate the necessary framework, which is not necessarily the repressive framework. We have to have deep discussions regarding drugs and drug trafficking that are very delicate as well, because we are in a condition of doing this with maturity and responsibility to put an end to prejudices, because to think that Bolivia is the source of drug trafficking is absurd. We believe that it is a blessing that Evo Morales has come to the presidency, because he's integrated the great majority of the Bolivian people that was marginalized in the times that I've been with Evo Morales. He has left no doubt regarding his policy to fight everything that has to do with drug trafficking and drug policy in the region. But we have to think with responsible people, specialists. This is a topic that is not just repression. Just think, when you go at it from repressiveness, you have situations like the ones in Mexico. We have to have global policies and innovative policies for the situation that obviously we are discussing, but I don't want to begin create a polemic. But I think that we have to be courageous and brave to put an end to drug trafficking, and we have to put an end to the taboos that we have when it comes to analyzing the problem. If we put an end to taboos, we will find the solutions that the region needs.
Okay, but I do have one more thing, to answer. If I may, I'll dare ask you a question. As an Argentine and as a member of OLA, I think it'd be interesting, and I've already talked about a number of things, but it would be perhaps interesting if you could explore what you may think are the biggest challenges during your term as the Secretary-General of UNASUR in the next 2 or 3 years. Well, to help out the foundational, integrate diversity, to be able to consolidate the essential principles of democracy and democratic institutionalization in the region, observatories on human rights, inclusive policies, a debate about income distribution that's fundamental in the region. There'd be no justice and equity, and we could end with a lot of problems in the region if we don't redistribute income fairly in the region. While Argentina is the more egalitarian country, in the region we are one of the most unequal regions in the world. So our agenda is quite dense, quite full, and we need to attack this with vigor. We are also working on Haiti, but Haiti is the clear example of internal neglect by Haiti and by the outside. Today we remember Haiti because of the drama that happened there, but hunger, exclusion, the worst that Haiti has lived is something that happened for a very long time. They suffered corruption, they had experienced a lot of horrible situations, but the world wasn't looking. Now, we are benefactors when this natural disaster happens. We can't solve it all, but UNASUR would like to create a strategic policy. I discussed this with President Clinton the other day. We don't only need donations, but we need policies, long-term policies, so that this is a real solution rather than a temporary solution. We need to reconstruct Haiti strategically. That is the great challenge in the region, and UNASUR must be a part of this. Thank you. Finally, but there was another question? There was one more question. Yes. Oh, excuse me. Microphone, please. I have a question. I'm afraid of microphones, but otherwise you can be translated. Okay, I'm Carlos Tayano. I live in New York since 1970. I self-exiled during the dictatorship of General Onganía in Argentina. In 1984, when the first democratic government after a long time took power, and that was Dr. Alfonsín, there was a proposal. Argentina is highly centralized in terms of every aspect. There is the capital city and Great Buenos Aires, and that conglomerate is a population problem, it's a political problem. It's located in a place that may not be the best for human development. During the years that I've lived in New York, our latitude, 40 degrees north, made me feel much more energetic. And so is the region. And I think it coincides when you look at the northern hemisphere. All capital cities are located in places like that. For instance, New York, and even old civilizations, they are located between 30 and 40 degrees latitude. May I ask for a favor? Could you please be brief in your question? I will, because of the audience here. So what I was wondering is, why do Argentines still keep Buenos Aires where it is rather than move it? Move the capital from a place that has floods every year, is very low in terms of the sea level, and it suffers at the mercy of the climate of the Paraná River. You know, we have a lot of negativity in Argentina. We have good things too, positive thinking. So you are from Patagonia, and you know better than I do how the climate affects people. You know, he's asking whether I think, well, yes, my question is the following. All the nations that have the gestational, let's remember the march to the west to the United States, but we have to ask Dr. Kirchner to answer. If you can remember immigration to Israel, may I please answer so that you'll know what I think. I used to be a mayor in 1987 while Alfonsín proposed a change of capital to Vietnam. I fully supported him. Maybe people from the capital will get mad at me, but I was in agreement. And I'm saying it was an important proposal. It was important to think about decentralization, even though he was my political rival. I do hope someday Argentina, after solving the problems that we have, can discuss this once again. But this is not a small matter. You are right. Thank you.
Hay una última pregunta del doctor Klicksberg. Con micrófono, por favor, Bernardo.
Usted mencionó hace un rato lo que muy bien caracterizó
A
como
while
tema
ago,
central
you mentioned
de
something
América
that you considered a
Latina.
central
Esta semana hubo un
topic for
balance
Latin
sobre la
America.
meta del milenio,
Rightfully
se
so,
vieron
there was some progress
hay
on
avances muy
the
importantes
Millennium
en la meta del milenio,
goals,
pero
and
también
there's
vimos
some
que América
good
Latina
progress,
sigue
but we saw
siendo
that Latin
la
America
región
continues to
efectivamente
be
más desigual de
the
todo el planeta
most
Tierra,
unequal region,
donde
the region with
10%
most
más rico
inequality
tiene
in
30,
on
50
Earth.
veces lo que el
The
10%
rich
más
had 30
pobre,
or 50% more than the
España son 10 veces,
10% that's poor,
hacer una
and in
comparación.
Italy and in
Usted
Spain it's
tiene una
10%. Just
larguísima
you
experiencia
have a lot of
combatiendo la desigualdad.
experience fighting against
¿Qué
inequality.
lecciones
So
sea,
What
¿cómo se
are
puede
your lessons
efectivamente
learned?
combatir la desigualdad que
How
no solo
could
los
we fight
ingresos, es en
inequality,
la
not just in
tierra, en
income,
el
but land,
crédito, en
credit,
educación, en salud,
education, health?
protección de salud?
What are the lessons learned?
Educación, igualdad de
Education, equal opportunity,
distribución del ingreso correcta,
the right distribution of income,
rentabilidades
fair
adecuadas,
distribution of
no ser
income,
empleado de las corporaciones.
tax, and not to be
Porque
employed by corporations.
la región ha llegado a
That's
ser la
important
región
because
más
the region
desigual,
has been
porque
the
muchos
most unequal,
pueblos
because many
trataron de quedar mejor con las corporaciones
try
que
to
las
do better by
corporaciones,
their
hablar políticamente como corresponde.
by their
Y la
companies
rentabilidad
than by the
empresarial es
people,
importante, estamos de
and
acuerdo
that's
todos los que
important.
estamos
Income,
con esta
profitability is important. That's important, but there is no fair distribution of income. Argentina has done something quite important. We've destined 6% of our
educación de nuestro
of our GDP to education. That's a very, very good progress. If we don't invest in education and production, if there's no 50-50 between money and work, and if we don't attack the endemic problems that we have, we can't solve it. But mainly, we need to build wealth along with this, because there are some regions and some nations that have better possibilities. Others have been totally thrown into poverty, and that's how the institution needs to help out economies that have stopped producing and generating work, people who don't only lack education, but they've been destroyed. It's not easy, but we are your followers. Once again, Dr. Kirchner would like to thank you and thank the Argentine delegation and all of you here for being in this meeting, and would like to give you, on behalf of the New School, of some material that Cecilia Golombé could give you. A bag full of books. I think this will be the first fight that I will have with the president, because she want to take the books away from me. Great. She and I always fight for books. Okay, so if our children see that we have some books, sometimes we have the same book. That's why we're married for 35 years.
Gracias.